All right, welcome into the PFF NFL Daily. Sam Monson here from Radio Row, like we have been all week, joined by Doug Kyed, cousin Doug to Steve.
Cousin Doug.
Doug's our NFL insider, our man behind the scenes. And Doug, we talked a lot about the Bengals already this week. I want to focus on the Rams in our last daily before the Super Bowl. And really the big thing is, have they been justified already with the way that they have constructed this roster, which most people hated, right?
Right.
Let's trade everything away and let's get all these proven commodities. Let's go after OBJ. Let's go after Von Miller. Let's go after Matthew Stafford, all these things, and have no draft picks to show for it. But this is the game that they wanted to get out of that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I'll get to that point in a second, but like on its surface, it does feel like these two teams were built very differently.
Yeah.
And then it's two very different ways to build a Super Bowl roster. One, obviously, with the rookie quarterback, rookie star wide receiver, like a bunch of kind of young contracts mixed in with some bigger free agent contracts. And then the Rams, like you mentioned, spending all of this money, making all of these trades to build this kind of super team. And yeah, I do think it's justified already by making the Super Bowl and pushing all the chips in, like they've said, and everything, and making this happen and getting to this point. Obviously, if they lose, it doesn't look quite as good, but I don't think before they made that trade for Matthew Stafford, they're not going to be in the Super Bowl with Jared Goff. You know, before they make that trade for Von Miller, who knows if they're at this point? Before they sign Odell Beckham Jr. as a free agent, who knows? And I mean, is it a sustainable way to keep building a winning team? Maybe if you've got like Mickey Loomis running the books and you just keep pushing everything forward, but I do think this will catch up to the Rams at some point. But just the fact that they're here, I think it does show that this is a way to build a Super Bowl team if you've got the right players to acquire and if you can convince everyone to come.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it has to result in a win for it to be a successful enterprise, right? I understand, like it's done the job so far, but if you don't come away with a Super Bowl win, you didn't do anything, right? You got back to the game, but you got to the game the first time with Jared Goff. The whole point is the difference between Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford is supposed to be the difference between getting to the game, losing, or getting to the game and getting that championship at the end of it. And the whole concept of this all-in that the Rams are said to have done, I'm not sure it's quite as all-in as people say, but the whole point is it's to get that championship. And if you get the championship, pretty much anything is justified, right? You can literally mortgage the future, and you can go all in if all you're looking to do is to get over that hump and to get that Super Bowl win, and then the future is the future. Who cares? But then you get to the interesting thing of whether this is quite as dramatic and quite as all in as people claim, as it seems to be, because you know the Von Miller deal, for example, looks fantastic right now. He's paying off. He's the best graded defender in the postseason, and then now they have a choice, right? They can let him go and they can recoup a little bit of what they gave up to get him in terms of compensatory draft pick. They can try and re-sign him. Like, he might not cost that much, right, given his age, given his production profile before he arrived with the Rams, and then ultimately every year they actually end up picking quite a lot in the draft. It's just not high draft picks. They trade back, they get a ton of compensatory draft picks, and they end up selecting 7, 8, 9 times in the draft. And if they can keep hitting on those picks, or at least hit on a couple of them every year, they might be able to keep this thing running.
Yeah, but I mean that's tricky. That's the tricky part of trying to hit on those, second, third round, fourth round picks. And it doesn't help when you use a second round pick on a guy like Tutu Atwell,
who
hasn't played at all this season. Obviously, it would be in better shape if they had done a better job with that pick. But obviously, overall, they have done a good job drafting. And we'd be remiss to say that, or I'd be remiss to say that their best two players, probably Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald, actually are two homegrown talents. They drafted them a while ago, but it's not as if all of their players are these guys that they either traded for or signed. I do think that, making it this far, making the Super Bowl, the point that I was making earlier, that I do think it's justified. I think that as long as Matthew Stafford's your quarterback, and obviously he's going to be there for a while at this point, I do think that they can keep getting back to this place. Maybe not all the way back to the Super Bowl, but at least they're going to have a chance. Whereas if they had kept Jared Goff, or if they had drafted a quarterback, or if they had done something else at that position, I just don't know if they would have been in this place moving forward the way that I expect them to. with Matthew Stafford at quarterback, and it all does depend on how they handle things moving forward. If they are willing to re-sign Von Miller, if they are willing to re-sign Odell Beckham Jr., if they're willing to keep pushing those chips in and pushing along the salary cap hits the way the Saints have.
The moment we've been waiting for since September is finally here. In honor of the big game, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 56, is giving new customers 56-1 odds on either team. Bet just $5 and get $280 in free bets if your team wins. DraftKings Sportsbook is now live in New York, meaning you can bet from almost a third of the country. If Sportsbook isn't in your state yet, play DraftKings Daily Fantasy Football Contest for Super Bowl 56. New customers can get a free shot at $1 million top prize with their first deposit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, use promo code PFF, and get 56-1 odds on either team. Bet just $5 and get $280 in free bets if your team wins. That's promo code PFF at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 56. Must be 21 or older. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full list of requirements and state-specific responsible gaming resources. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And that's kind of the point with this strategy, right? Is that, hitting on low round draft picks is always a tough thing to do, and sustaining that over any kind of period of time is tricky. But the point is, they've gotten rid of the high draft picks for these proven commodities. And Steve has made the point in our podcast that the Rams own 3 of the 5 most valuable non-quarterback players in the NFL this year by PFF WAR, right? Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Cooper Kupp. These guys have had as big an impact as any players in the NFL. Then you have Matthew Stafford, the most important position in the NFL. So those are the 4 things that you have on this team that aren't going anywhere, right? Cooper Kupp's there for a while. Matthew Stafford obviously is there for a while. Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, both locked down. Those guys are going to be there next year, and they're going to be there the year after that. And as long as that is the spine of this team, you have an awful lot of flexibility to swing and miss on a bunch of 5th, 6th, 7th round draft picks.
It also helps too, and you just made this point as well, but the fact that those are players at extremely valuable positions too, that you've got the pass rusher, despite the fact that he's in the middle, he's still the pass rusher. You've got the quarterback, you've got the wide receiver and the cornerback. It's not like these pieces are like a running back or even like a linebacker. It is the most important positions to have those guys. So I think that does make it easier to fill in pieces otherwise, and hit on some of the linebackers or hit on some of the safeties or whatever it is in later rounds. So I think that that's another way that they have built this smartly, is that they have invested in those key positions, and that it does make it easier to put a good roster around them.
Yeah, I think that's a part of this that often gets overlooked, is that they may have done this in an unusual way and have plowed an awful lot of resources into a very small number of players, but those players are at very valuable positions. And even if, so arguably the best cornerback in the NFL, arguably the best pass rusher period in the NFL, even if he's not an edge rusher in Aaron Donald, arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL this year. So that's literally the 3 most important non-quarterback positions by PFF WAR ticked off, with arguably the best player in the NFL at that position. The only one they're missing is, an elite pass blocker, an elite left tackle, and they already have one in Andrew Whitworth, right? Who admittedly is sort of getting older, getting slightly slower. He's slowing down a little bit, but also that's the one spot where one guy doesn't make the same level of difference, right? You need 5 guys that are okay. One superstar left tackle doesn't necessarily do you any good if the other 4 positions are disasters. So from that point of view, the Rams are actually building this thing in a really smart way, and deliberately not putting any resources at linebacker, where that position has become kind of more diminished and more devalued over recent years. I think that is a really important part when it comes to the sustainability of this kind of project, if you like, and whether they can keep getting back to the Super Bowl, is that the spine of this team is A, locked down, B, very good, and C, in the most important positions.
I think it helps that a guy like Sean McVay is leading it all too, because that it makes it easier to get the Odell Beckham Jr. And obviously they lucked out in that they got him before Robert Woods suffered the knee injury. But the fact that a guy like Sean McVay and all those other players, Jalen Ramsey and Von Miller, can recruit a player player like that makes it easier to build this team around them. Being in LA, I think, makes it easier to build this team, and just, you know, having that kind of gravitas to do that, to be able to get Eric Weddle off of retirement and have him filling in a starting role. You know, not every team would be able to do that, I don't think, and the Rams are a team that can. The Whitworth thing is interesting. First of all, if you had to, like, just a complete layman, if you had to say, like, what position could a 40-year-old start at outside of quarterback, I don't think many people would say left tackle.
He's the only guy that's ever done it.
It is, and it's amazing. Like, there have been other right tackles. There's been Jackie Slater, and there's been these other guys, but, you know, it is amazing that even that it should be like maybe more of a diminished asset, like a 40-year-old left tackle, but he's still unbelievably good, and they probably got him a little bit cheaper because he is so old. I don't know how long he can keep doing it for, and they're going to have to start planning for the future at that position, but it's certainly valuable to have a guy like that who not every team would maybe still have, but they're willing to keep putting him out there.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal. You can see signs that he's not quite the player that he used to be. He's given up more sacks this year than he typically does, and when he loses, it can tend to be a bit ugly, but he's still been a top-end graded left tackle at PFF when it comes to pass blocking. So look, I think this rests on whether or not they win the game, whether it's a success or not. Are they going to win the game?
See, my head says the Rams are going to win. Like, everything logically on paper.
And that, I think, is the theme in this room.
Absolutely.
Like, everybody I've spoken to has leaned Rams.
Like, you just go with, if you put Von Miller and Aaron Donald up against that Bengals offensive line, you almost think, like, I mean, the Bengals don't have a chance. But Joe Burrow has been, you know, really good. Like, he hasn't been fantastic in the playoffs, but for the amount of pressure that he received in that game against the Titans, it was extremely impressive. They just seem to have that sort of luck or whatever it is behind them. And, you know, I'm like you said earlier, I'm an NFL insider, whatever it is. I talk to all these execs around the league, like coaches, everything. They all give the most generic compliments about Joe Burrow. Like, he's got the it factor, he's a winner, all these things. Like, it does seem like he's got that weird intangible, though. So, well, my head says the Rams should win. My heart says the Bengals should win, and I'm going to say the Bengals are going to win this one.
Okay, that's the last PFF NFL Daily from Super Bowl Radio Row. We'll talk to you next week.